The massive Federation Council chamber buzzed with excitement as representatives from across the galaxy gathered for what they believed would be a historic moment. Hundreds of species sat in their designated sections, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes that stretched from floor to ceiling. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Sarah Chen, the first human to address the Galactic Federation. Sarah looked out at the sea of alien faces, some familiar after months of diplomatic meetings, others completely new. The Zolarians with their crystalline bodies caught the light and scattered it in beautiful patterns. The Vorthak delegation sat in their environmental suits, their gaseous forms swirling with emotions only they could understand. Even the proud Kethmori, who rarely left their home systems, had sent representatives to witness this moment. The Federation had welcomed humanity just 6 months ago, after Earth's first contact with the galaxy's largest political body. It had been a whirlwind of cultural exchanges, trade negotiations, and technological demonstrations. Every species that joined the Federation traditionally shared their unique technologies with all members, creating a massive pool of knowledge that benefited everyone. Honored members of the Federation, Sarah began, her voice carried by universal translators to every corner of the chamber. Humanity is grateful for the warm welcome we have received. We have learned much from your civilizations, and we hope to contribute meaningfully to this great alliance. Murmurs of approval rippled through the audience. Chancellor Vexutar of the Zolarians, who served as the current Federation leader, smiled with what humans had learned was their equivalent of pleasure. The preliminary meetings had gone well, and everyone expected humanity to follow the standard protocol. We have prepared detailed databases of our technologies, Sarah continued, and the chamber fell silent with anticipation. However, after careful consideration, humanity has decided that we cannot share these technologies with the Federation at this time. The silence stretched for several heartbeats before erupting into chaos. Delegates jumped to their feet, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of sounds. Some species flashed angry colors, others released chemical signals of distress, and a few simply stared in shock. Chancellor Vextar raised his crystalline hand, and the chamber's systems automatically dampened the noise until order was restored. Ambassador Chen, he said, his voice carrying a note of confusion that the translators conveyed perfectly. I believe there may have been a translation error. Did you say humanity refuses to share its technology? Sarah stood straighter, her calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the agitation around her. There was no translation error, Chancellor. Humanity appreciates the Federation's traditions, but we must respectfully decline to share our technological knowledge. The Kethmori delegate, a towering figure with multiple arms and eyes that glowed with inner fire, spoke next. This is unprecedented. Every species that joins the Federation shares their knowledge. It is the foundation of our cooperation and progress. We understand the tradition, Sarah replied, but we have reasons for our decision that we hope the Federation will respect. Dr. Theiss, the chief scientist from the aquatic Merthul civilization, activated his water-filled communication device. Your species showed us wonders during the preliminary meetings. Your medical technology alone could save millions of lives across the galaxy. How can you withhold such gifts? Sarah had expected this response. During the first contact meetings, human representatives had demonstrated several technologies that had amazed the Federation scientists. Earth's medical nanobots could repair cellular damage at a level that surpassed most Federation medicine. Human computer systems operated on quantum principles that allowed for calculations the Federation thought impossible. Most impressive of all, humanity had developed clean fusion reactors so efficient they seemed to violate several known laws of physics. Our medical technology, our computers, our energy systems, they all came at a great cost to learn and develop, Sarah explained. Humanity spent centuries making mistakes, learning from failures and slowly building our knowledge. We believe that simply giving away the final results would rob other species of that same journey of discovery. The chamber erupted again, but this time with sounds of disbelief rather than anger. The concept was so foreign to Federation thinking that many delegates needed time to process it. A representative from the Peaceful Jal Collective spoke up, their melodic voice filled with confusion. But sharing knowledge allows all species to advance together. Why would you want to slow our progress? We don't want to slow your progress, Sarah said firmly. We want to ensure it's genuine progress. When knowledge is simply given without understanding, It becomes a tool rather than wisdom. Look at your own histories. How many species have become dependent on Federation technology without truly understanding how it works? This struck home with several delegates who shifted uncomfortably in their seats. It was true that many Federation members had stopped developing their own technologies once they gained access to more advanced systems from other species. Chancellor Vextar leaned forward, his crystalline form catching the chamber's lights. Are you suggesting that the Federation's greatest strength, our shared knowledge, is actually a weakness? Not a weakness, Sarah clarified, but perhaps not the strength you believe it to be. What happens when a species needs to solve a problem that no existing Federation technology can address? What happens when they need to innovate rather than simply apply existing solutions? The question hung in the air like a challenge. For the first time in the session, the chamber remained quiet, not from shock but from thoughtful consideration. Humanity offers something different, Sarah continued. Instead of giving you our technologies, we offer to teach you our methods of discovery. We can share our approaches to problem solving, our techniques for innovation, our ways of turning failures into learning opportunities. Ambassador Raal of the insectoid Tikri hive mind clicked his mandibles in what humans had learned was their sign of deep thought. This is unusual. You would teach us to discover what you have already discovered rather than simply showing us your discoveries? Exactly, Sarah confirmed. Because the real value isn't in the technology itself. It's in the ability to create new technology when you need it. The chamber began to buzz with quiet conversations as delegates discussed this unprecedented proposal among themselves. Some seemed intrigued, others remained skeptical, and a few appeared openly hostile to the idea. Chancellor Vextar finally called for order again. Ambassador Chen, this is far outside Federation protocols. We will need time to consider your unique proposal. This session is adjourned while the Council deliberates. As the delegates filed out, Sarah remained at the center podium, knowing that humanity had just thrown the galaxy's largest political body into complete turmoil. The next few days would determine whether Earth's radical approach to galactic cooperation would be accepted or rejected entirely. The private chambers of the Federation Council buzzed with heated debate for 3 straight days. Behind closed doors, representatives argued about humanity's shocking proposal, with an intensity rarely seen in the usually diplomatic Federation halls. Some species saw it as an insult to thousands of years of cooperative tradition, while others found themselves curious about this radically different approach. Chancellor Vexitar stood before the massive holographic display that showed voting patterns from across the Federation. The results were troubling. The galaxy was splitting into factions over humanity's refusal to share technology. Traditional allies found themselves on opposite sides of the debate, and some of the more aggressive species were calling for humanity's immediate expulsion from the Federation. The Po Kethmori delegation has formally requested that we reject humanity's proposal and demand. They follow standard protocols, announced Secretary Valine, her tentacled form shifting between colors that indicated stress. They argued that allowing this precedent would undermine the entire foundation of Federation cooperation. Ambassador Raal of the Tikri clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. My hive mind has been analyzing their proposal for 72 hours straight. We find merit in their reasoning, though it disturbs our understanding of efficient resource distribution. Dr. Thys of the Mirthul floated in his water sphere, his bioluminescent patches flickering with rapid thoughts. I have reviewed our own technological development history. We did indeed stop most of our research once we gained access to Zilarian crystal technology. Our scientists now merely apply existing solutions rather than seeking new ones. That proves nothing, growled Commander Thex of the militaristic Veltar. Efficiency is paramount. Why waste time rediscovering what is already known? The humans are being selfish, hoarding their advances while we face real problems that their technology could solve. Chancellor Vextar had been reviewing reports from various Federation worlds, and what he found was disturbing. The commander's words about real problems were more accurate than he had initially realized. 3 member worlds were currently facing crises that Federation technology couldn't solve, and their own scientific communities had atrophied to the point where innovation seemed impossible. Perhaps we should hear from the humans again before making our decision, suggested Representative Kolma of the Peaceful Ashanti. Their first presentation raised questions that deserved deeper exploration. The suggestion sparked another round of debate, but eventually the council agreed to summon Ambassador Chen for a private session. When Sarah entered the chamber 6 hours later, she could feel the tension in the air. The various species present showed clear signs of stress, conflict, and confusion. Ambassador Chen, Chancellor Vextar began formally, "The council has been deliberating your proposal. Many of us find it challenging to accept. Perhaps you could provide more specific examples of how your approach would benefit the Federation." Sarah had spent the past 3 days preparing for exactly this question. "Chancellor, with your permission, I'd like to share a story from Earth's history. 2 centuries ago, our planet faced a crisis with our food production systems. Traditional farming could no longer feed our growing population." The delegates leaned forward, intrigued despite themselves by this historical perspective. 2 regions took different approaches, Sarah continued. One region received advanced farming technology from a more developed area. They implemented it immediately and saw their food production triple within a year. The second region was given only the basic principles behind the technology and told to develop their own solutions. Clearly, the first region was more successful, Commander Thex interrupted. "Your story proves our point about efficiency." Sarah smiled slightly. "Actually, no. The first region became completely dependent on the imported technology. When it failed during an unexpected climate shift, they had no backup plans, no understanding of how to modify it, and their population faced famine. The second region, however, had developed multiple different approaches based on the principles they'd learned. When their climate changed, they quickly adapted their methods and not only survived but actually improved their food production beyond what the imported technology could have achieved." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Dr. Thiss was the first to speak, his bioluminescent patterns showing rapid thought processing. "You're suggesting that independence of innovation is more valuable than immediate access to advanced solutions." "I'm suggesting that the ability to solve new problems is more valuable than solutions to old problems," Sarah clarified. "Your Federation faces challenges today that didn't exist when your founding technologies were developed. Climate shifts on Myrtle Prime, the energy crisis on New Kethmore, the plague affecting the Jal colonies. These are new problems requiring new solutions." Commander Thex's aggressive posture softened slightly. "Are you saying human technology could solve these current crises?" "Some of it might help temporarily," Sarah admitted. "But what happens when new crises arise that our technology can't address? You'd be dependent on us to solve every problem, and eventually, we'd fail you because we can't predict every future challenge." Representative Colma's peaceful species rarely showed strong emotions, but her voice carried unusual intensity when she spoke. "The human proposal is not about withholding aid, it's about teaching self-reliance." "Exactly," Sarah confirmed. "We're offering something more valuable than our current technology. We're offering to teach you how to become technological innovators yourselves, how to approach problems creatively, how to learn from failures, how to build knowledge rather than simply apply it." Ambassador Ryle's entire hive mind seemed to click in unison as they processed this concept. This would require fundamental changes to how Federation science operates. Our research institutions have become application centers rather than discovery centers. "Change is difficult," Sarah acknowledged. "But consider the alternative. Right now, your Federation's technological advancement depends entirely on new member species bringing fresh innovations. What happens when you've contacted every species in the galaxy? What happens when you face a crisis that none of your existing technologies can solve?" The question struck the delegates like a physical blow. For the first time, they realized that their greatest strength might also be their greatest vulnerability. The Federation had become a vast repository of knowledge, but it had lost the ability to create new knowledge when needed. Chancellor Vextar's crystalline form shifted to a deeper blue, indicating profound thought. "This proposal would require unprecedented changes to our entire structure of cooperation." "It would," Sarah agreed. "But it would also ensure that the Federation remains strong and adaptable for millennia to come, rather than just benefiting from technologies that already exist." Dr. Thiss suddenly brightened, his patterns showing excitement. "We could establish new research partnerships. Instead of simply sharing finished technologies, we could share research methodologies, collaborate on solving problems together, learn from each other's approaches to innovation." Now you're beginning to understand what we're offering, Sarah said with genuine warmth. We don't want to withhold our knowledge. We want to share something far more valuable. We want to share the ability to create knowledge. The chamber filled with the sounds of hundreds of simultaneous conversations as delegates discussed this revolutionary concept among their own species. For the first time since the debate began, the mood seemed hopeful rather than hostile. Commander Thex, who had been the most opposed to the human proposal, finally spoke again. This would make us stronger, wouldn't it? More capable of defending ourselves against unknown threats, Sarah nodded. A galaxy full of innovative, independent civilizations working together to solve problems would be far more resilient than a galaxy dependent on a fixed pool of existing solutions. As the session concluded, it was clear that the debate had shifted from whether to accept humanity's proposal to how to implement it. The Federation was about to embark on the most significant change in its history, and it all started with one species' refusal to simply hand over their technology. 3 weeks after the heated council debates, the first group of Federation scientists arrived at the human research station orbiting Earth. They came from 12 different species, each representing civilizations with their own scientific traditions and ways of understanding the universe. What they expected was a typical technology transfer session, where humans would demonstrate their advanced systems and provide operating manuals. What they got instead was something completely unprecedented. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Earth's chief research coordinator, welcomed the diverse group to the station's main laboratory. The Zilarian representatives glowed with anticipation, their crystalline bodies catching every photon of light in the room. The Mirthul scientists floated in their portable water environments, their bioluminescent patches flickering with curiosity. Even the normally stoic Kethmori delegation seemed eager to finally access human technology. Welcome to our research station, Dr. Rodriguez began. I know you're all expecting to see demonstrations of our fusion reactors, medical nanobots, and quantum computers. Instead, I want to start with something much simpler. She led them to a basic laboratory bench where nothing but simple materials lay scattered. Metal rods, electronic components, measuring devices, and what appeared to be broken machinery. This, she said, picking up a twisted piece of metal, is the remains of the first fusion reactor prototype we built 50 years ago. It exploded spectacularly and nearly killed the entire research team. The alien scientists exchanged confused glances. Dr. Velthok of the Zilarian spoke first, his crystalline form shifting to a puzzled orange hue. Why are you showing us a failure? Surely you want to demonstrate your successful technologies? Dr. Rodriguez smiled. This failure taught us more than 100 successful experiments could have. Would you like to know what we learned? For the next hour, she walked the group through the disaster in detail. How the fusion containment field had destabilized, why their calculations had been wrong, what assumptions they had made that proved false, and most importantly, how the failure had led them to completely rethink their approach to fusion technology. Dr. Thys of the Mirthul was fascinated. You're saying the explosion was valuable? Incredibly valuable, Dr. Rodriguez confirmed. It forced us to question everything we thought we knew about plasma dynamics. The reactor that eventually succeeded was built on principles we only discovered because this one failed so dramatically. She moved to the next station, where a collection of medical devices in various stages of development was displayed. Some were clearly early prototypes, crude and bulky compared to the sleek nanobots the Federation had seen demonstrated. Others were twisted, melted, or obviously broken. Our medical nanobots went through 47 major design iterations over 15 years, she explained. Iteration number 12 nearly killed the test subject. Iteration 23 worked perfectly in laboratory conditions, but broke down immediately in a living organism. Iteration 31 actually made patients sicker than they were before treatment. The scientists were horrified. Dr. Keth of the Keth-Mori delegation stepped back from the display. Your testing practices seem dangerously reckless. How many died during your development process? In the early stages, too many, Dr. Rodriguez admitted solemnly. But each death taught us something crucial about biological systems that we couldn't have learned any other way. We developed increasingly sophisticated simulation methods precisely because we couldn't bear to continue losing test subjects. Our current nanobots are safe because they're built on the foundation of every single failure that came before them. Ambassador Raal of the Tikri hive mind clicked thoughtfully. This is a completely different approach to research than anything in Federation records. You document failures as carefully as successes. More carefully, actually, Dr. Rodriguez said, leading them to a massive database terminal. Every failed experiment, every wrong assumption, every dead end is recorded in detail. This failure database is actually more valuable than our success database because it tells us not just what works, but what doesn't work and why. She activated the terminal, revealing thousands of entries spanning decades of research across every field of human science. The alien scientists stared in amazement at the sheer volume of documented failures. Dr. Velthok's crystalline form shifted to a deep blue, indicating profound thought. The Federation has no equivalent to this. We typically discard failed experiments as wastes of resources. That's exactly the problem we're trying to address, Dr. Rodriguez explained. When you only study successes, you miss the crucial learning that comes from understanding why things fail. Failure is the most effective teacher in the universe if you're willing to listen to it. She moved to the final station, where a seemingly simple quantum computer hummed quietly. Unlike the advanced systems the Federation had seen before, this one was clearly a basic model. This is our first-generation quantum computer, she said. It's actually less powerful than some Federation computing systems, but what makes it special is that we built it from scratch, making every possible mistake along the way. Dr. Thiss examined the device with interest. Why show us an inferior model when you have superior technology? Because understanding how this simple system works gives you the foundation to build something even better than our current systems, Dr. Rodriguez replied. If I gave you our most advanced computer, you could operate it, but you couldn't improve it. If you understand how this basic model works, you can innovate beyond anything we've imagined. The concept was beginning to sink in. Representative Colma of the Ashanti spoke quietly. You're teaching us to become inventors rather than operators. Exactly, Dr. Rodriguez confirmed. An operator can only use what exists. An inventor can create what doesn't exist yet. She led them to a comfortable seating area where refreshments had been prepared for the various species' dietary requirements. Now I want to hear about your greatest scientific failures. What experiments went wrong? What assumptions proved false? What disasters taught you the most? The request caught the scientists completely off guard. In Federation culture, failure was shameful, something to be hidden rather than discussed. But Dr. Rodriguez's enthusiasm for learning from mistakes was infectious. Dr. Velthok was the first to open up, describing a crystal growth experiment that had gone horribly wrong and destroyed an entire laboratory. As he spoke, Dr. Rodriguez asked probing questions about what had caused the failure, what they had learned from it, and how it had changed their approach to crystal technology. Soon, other scientists began sharing their own stories of failed experiments and unexpected discoveries. Dr. Thies described a biological research project that had created something completely different from what they intended, but which had led to breakthrough insights about marine ecosystems. Dr. Keth reluctantly admitted to a weapons development project that had failed spectacularly but had accidentally resulted in new metallurgical techniques. As the discussions continued, something remarkable happened. The alien scientists began connecting their failure experiences to potential new research directions. They started asking questions not about how to avoid mistakes, but about how to make mistakes more productively. This is extraordinary. Ambassador Rayal clicked excitedly. We're learning more about innovation in one afternoon than in years of standard research briefings. Dr. Rodriguez nodded with satisfaction. Now you're beginning to understand what humanity is really offering the Federation. We're not just sharing our technology. We're sharing our approach to creating technology. We're teaching you how to fail forward. The session continued for hours, with the alien scientists becoming increasingly excited about this new perspective on research and development. By the end of the day, they weren't asking for human technology anymore. They were asking for permission to start their own failure-based research programs. As the group prepared to leave, Dr. Velthok approached Dr. Rodriguez privately. This changes everything, doesn't it? The way we think about science, about progress, about cooperation. It changes everything, she confirmed. And it's just the beginning. 6 months after the first research exchange program began, the Federation was experiencing something unprecedented, a wave of innovation unlike anything in its recorded history. Species that had been content to use existing technologies for centuries were suddenly developing new solutions to problems they had lived with for generations. On the crystalline world of Zelaria Prime, Dr. Velthok stood before a shattered laboratory filled with the remains of his latest experiment. 3 months ago, such a spectacular failure would have been a source of shame and career damage. Today, he was documenting every detail with the enthusiasm of a scientist making a breakthrough discovery. Experiment 847 has failed catastrophically, he spoke into his recording device, his crystalline form glowing with excitement rather than embarrassment. The harmonic resonance approach to crystal matrix enhancement has proven completely wrong for high-energy applications. The entire structure collapsed within 0.3 seconds of activation. His assistant, Dr. Nalvex, carefully collected samples of the destroyed crystals for analysis. Should we begin reconstruction for the next attempt? Not yet, Dr. Velthok replied, following the human methodology they had learned. First, we need to understand exactly why this failed. The failure pattern suggests our fundamental assumptions about crystal harmonic interaction are flawed. This was revolutionary thinking for Zellarian science. For thousands of years, their research had focused on perfecting existing crystal technologies passed down through generations. The concept of deliberately pushing systems beyond their breaking points to understand their limitations was completely foreign to their culture. But the results were undeniable. In just 6 months, Zellarian scientists had developed 3 entirely new crystal applications by studying their failures. They had discovered that crystals could store and process information in ways that complemented Federation computing systems, creating hybrid technologies that neither humans nor traditional Federation science had imagined. Meanwhile, on the aquatic world of Mirthul, Dr. Thess was leading an equally revolutionary transformation in biological research. His laboratory had become a controlled environment for what he called productive failure, or deliberately creating biological systems that would break down in interesting ways. The seaweed modification experiment has failed. Again, he reported to his team, his bioluminescent patches flickering with what observers now recognized as scientific excitement. But look at how it failed. The modified seaweed, instead of growing larger as intended, had developed an unusual protein that actually purified water more effectively than any existing Federation filtration system. The failure had become an accidental breakthrough that could solve water contamination problems across dozens of Federation worlds. Dr. Theiss, his research partner Dr. Moval, asked, "Are we going to continue trying to make the seaweed grow larger, or should we focus on developing this purification property?" "Both," Dr. Theiss replied, applying another lesson from human methodology. "We'll continue the original experiment because we still don't understand why it's failing, and that knowledge could be valuable. But we'll also explore this unexpected discovery because innovation often comes from pursuing accidents. The concept of following multiple research paths simultaneously, especially ones that included deliberate failure analysis, was spreading throughout Federation science. Research budgets that had once been considered wasted on failed experiments were now being viewed as investments in understanding. On the militaristic world of Veltar Prime, Commander Thex was discovering that human innovation methods had applications far beyond pure science. Her military engineers had begun applying failure analysis to tactical systems, deliberately stress testing their equipment and strategies beyond normal parameters to identify weaknesses before they became battlefield disasters. The new shield generator failed under concentrated fire, reported Lieutenant Krall, standing amid the smoking remains of their latest defensive prototype. But it failed in a very interesting way. Instead of simply shutting down like previous models, the overloaded shield generator had created an electromagnetic pulse that disabled the attacking weapons. What should have been a defensive failure had accidentally become an offensive capability. Commander Thex studied the data from multiple angles. "How many times can we reproduce this failure mode?" "Every test, Commander. It's completely predictable once we understand the failure mechanism. Then we haven't really failed, have we?" Commander Thex realized. "We've discovered a new type of weapon disguised as a shield malfunction." This type of thinking was spreading throughout Veltar military science. They were discovering that many of their previous equipment failures had actually been missed opportunities for tactical innovation. By studying why systems failed, they were developing entirely new approaches to combat technology. But the most remarkable transformation was happening on the peaceful world of Ashanti. where Representative Kolma had returned with human failure methodology and applied it to social engineering. Her people had always been diplomats and mediators, but they had approached conflict resolution using only traditional methods passed down through their culture. Our mediation of the Kethmori-Tikri trade dispute has failed completely, Kolma announced to her diplomatic team. The negotiations broke down after only 6 hours, and both sides are more hostile than when we started. Traditionally, such a failure would have meant abandoning the mediation and referring the dispute to higher Federation authorities. Instead, Kolma's team began analyzing exactly how and why their approach had failed. The Kethmori respond to direct confrontation, while the Tikri prefer consensus building, observed her aide Sendel. Our traditional approach tried to find middle ground, but we actually created a situation where neither side felt their communication style was respected. So our failure teaches us that different species need different mediation approaches, Kolma concluded. What if we tried separate negotiation styles with each group, then brought them together only after establishing trust through their preferred methods? The revised approach worked brilliantly. Not only did they resolve the trade dispute, but they developed a new model for cross-species mediation that was being adopted throughout the Federation's diplomatic corps. Their failure had become a breakthrough in interstellar relations. Back on Earth, Dr. Rodriguez was receiving reports from research stations throughout Federation space. The transformation was happening faster and more thoroughly than even the most optimistic human projections had predicted. Elena called Dr. James Park, her research partner. You need to see these latest reports from the Outer Rim. The data streaming across their displays showed innovation rates that seemed almost impossible. Species were not just adopting human failure methodology, they were adapting it to their own unique ways of thinking and creating entirely new approaches to research and development. Look at this. Dr. Park pointed to a report from the insectoid Tikri. They've applied hive mind processing to failure analysis. When one experiment fails, the entire hive instantly shares the learning experience. They're iterating through failure cycles at a rate we never imagined possible. Dr. Rodriguez studied the data with growing amazement. They're not just copying our methods, they're improving them. Another report showed that the gaseous Vorthak had developed ways to simulate failures in their energy-based consciousness before attempting physical experiments. They were essentially pre-failing concepts in their minds, learning from mistakes before those mistakes could cause real damage. Elena, Dr. Park said quietly, I think we may have started something bigger than just sharing research methods. We've triggered a fundamental shift in how the galaxy thinks about knowledge and progress. Dr. Rodriguez nodded, watching as species after species reported breakthrough discoveries built on the foundation of analyzed failures. The Federation isn't just learning to innovate. They're learning to innovate in ways that we never thought of. The human approach to failure-based learning was evolving into something uniquely galactic, incorporating the strengths and perspectives of dozens of different species. The Federation was becoming something unprecedented, a civilization that could learn from mistakes fast enough to solve problems as they arose, rather than being limited to solutions that already existed. James, Dr. Rodriguez said with growing excitement, I think we're witnessing the birth of the galaxy's first truly adaptive civilization. 1 year after humanity's refusal to share their technology had shocked the Federation, an emergency session was called that would have seemed impossible just months before. This time, however, the crisis wasn't about technology sharing. It was about a threat that no existing Federation technology could handle. The Devourers had appeared at the edge of Federation space without warning. They were unlike anything the galaxy had ever encountered. Massive living ships that consumed energy directly from stars, leaving dead solar systems in their wake. 3 Federation colony systems had already been destroyed, and conventional weapons seemed to have no effect on the creatures. Chancellor Vexitar stood before the emergency assembly, his crystalline form flickering with stress patterns that every species could recognize. The situation is critical. Our combined fleets, using the most advanced weapons technology from every member species, have failed to even slow the Devourer advance. They appear to absorb energy-based attacks and use them to grow larger. The chamber was filled with desperate voices as species after species reported similar failures. The proud Kethmori military forces had been completely devastated. The advanced mirthal bioweapons had been consumed and turned against their creators. Even humanity's fusion-powered ships had proved useless, their energy merely feeding the creatures. Traditional Federation protocol would be to research countermeasures using our existing technology base, announced Dr. Velthok, who had become the unofficial spokesperson for the new innovation movement. However, our recent experiences suggest a different approach. Ambassador Sarah Chen, now serving as Earth's permanent representative, stood to address the assembly. Humanity proposes that we treat this crisis as the ultimate failure analysis opportunity. Instead of trying to defeat the Devourers with what we have, let's understand why everything we try fails, and use that knowledge to develop something completely new. The suggestion would have been rejected immediately a year ago. Now species throughout the Federation had learned to see failure as a learning opportunity, rather than a dead end. Commander Thex of the Veltar, whose military had suffered the most devastating losses, was the first to support the proposal. Our attacks fail because the creatures absorb energy. But failure analysis asks us, why do they absorb energy? How do they absorb it? What happens to the energy after they absorb it? Dr. Thys of the Mirthul activated his water sphere communication system. My teams have been analyzing the biological samples we managed to collect before our fleets were destroyed. The creatures don't just absorb energy. They seem to be powered by quantum vacuum fluctuations. They're feeding on the fundamental energy of space itself. This revelation sent shockwaves through the scientific community. The Devourers weren't just advanced predators. They were operating on principles that challenged the Federation's understanding of physics, Ambassador. Ral of the Tikri hive mind clicked rapidly, as his entire species processed the implications. If they feed on quantum vacuum energy, then conventional energy-based attacks don't just fail, they provide additional food sources. Our weapons are literally making them stronger. Exactly, Sarah confirmed. So the question becomes, how do we affect something that exists partially outside normal space-time? What kind of attack doesn't use energy? The challenge seemed impossible, but the Federation's new approach to innovation was designed exactly for impossible problems. Instead of looking for existing solutions, they began systematically exploring why conventional solutions failed. Dr. Velthok had an insight that could only have come from months of failure analysis training. What if we approached this backwards? Instead of trying to destroy them, what if we tried to understand what would make them stronger, then did the exact opposite? The Zalarian scientist began projecting holographic models showing how the Devourers interacted with different energy types. They absorb electromagnetic radiation, thermal energy, kinetic energy, and even gravitational distortions. But look at this pattern. They seem to avoid areas with high levels of quantum decoherence. Dr. Thys immediately grasped the implications. Quantum decoherence disrupts their ability to interact with vacuum energy. They can't feed in areas where quantum states are constantly collapsing. But how do we create massive quantum decoherence fields? Asked Representative Kolma. No Federation species has that capability. The question sparked the kind of innovative thinking that had become commonplace in the new Federation. Instead of looking for a single species solution, they began combining failed experiments from multiple civilizations. The Tikri hive mind processing creates natural quantum interference, Ambassador Raal pointed out. Our failed experiments with consciousness transfer always collapsed because of decoherence effects. Commander Thex added, our shield generators fail by creating electromagnetic pulses. We've been trying to eliminate this failure mode, but what if we amplified it instead? Dr. Velthok's crystals began glowing with excitement. And our crystal resonance failures always destabilize quantum fields in unpredictable ways. Instead of preventing the instability, we could weaponize it. Sarah watched with amazement as species after species began contributing their useless, failed technologies to a growing solution. Each failure, when combined with others, created possibilities that none of them could have imagined alone. We're talking about building a weapon system that deliberately uses every failure mode we've discovered, Dr. Thys summarized. Tikri consciousness interference, Feltar electromagnetic pulses, Zalarian crystal instabilities, and human quantum computing errors all working together. The concept was audacious beyond anything the Federation had ever attempted. They were proposing to build a weapon out of broken technology, powered by scientific failures. designed to do something that violated everything they thought they knew about physics. Dr. Rodriguez, participating via long-range communication from Earth, provided the crucial insight that tied everything together. You're not building a weapon. You're building a failure amplifier, something that makes reality itself fail in the specific way that disrupts quantum vacuum interaction. The Federation's greatest scientists and engineers threw themselves into the project with an enthusiasm that amazed their own species. They weren't trying to perfect existing technology. They were trying to perfect the art of controlled failure. Construction began simultaneously on 12 different Federation worlds, with each species contributing their most spectacular failures to the project. The Kethmori provided unstable power cores that had destroyed 3 research stations. The Ashanti contributed diplomatic algorithms that had failed so completely they had accidentally created new forms of communication chaos. Even the peaceful Jal offered their failed terraforming experiments, which had created environments so unstable that reality itself seemed confused about what should exist there. As construction progressed, something remarkable happened. The Devourers, which had been advancing steadily through Federation space, suddenly slowed their approach. Long-range sensors detected unusual behavior. The creatures seemed to be avoiding areas where the weapon construction was taking place. "They can sense it," Dr. Velthok reported excitedly. "The quantum decoherence effects from our construction failures are already affecting them from thousands of light-years away." Chancellor Vextar, who had watched his orderly Federation transform into something unrecognizable over the past year, made an observation that surprised even himself. "We're not just building a weapon to defeat the Devourers. We're proving that a civilization based on learning from failure is more adaptable than any threat the universe can create." The weapon itself was still weeks from completion, but the Federation had already won something more valuable than a military victory. They had learned that the combination of diverse failures could create solutions that no single success could match. As Sarah Chen watched the construction reports streaming in from across the galaxy, she realized that humanity's refusal to share technology had accomplished something far greater than anyone had imagined. They hadn't just changed how the Federation approached research and development, they had transformed the galaxy into a civilization capable of turning its greatest weaknesses into its greatest strengths. The Devourers were about to face something unprecedented in the universe, a species that had learned to weaponize failure itself. The day of the weapon test arrived with a tension that gripped the entire galaxy. Across Federation space, billions of beings watched, as the most audacious scientific experiment in galactic history prepared to either save civilization or fail so spectacularly that it would become the ultimate learning experience. The weapon itself defied every conventional understanding of military technology. Rather than a sleek, perfected machine, it resembled a chaotic collection of deliberately broken systems held together by principles that shouldn't work but somehow did. Tickery consciousness processors flickered in and out of coherence. Zellarian crystals resonated at frequencies that destroyed themselves and regenerated constantly, and Veltar shield generators created electromagnetic storms that should have torn the device apart. Admiral Sarah Chen, who had been given command of the test mission, stood on the bridge of the Federation flagship Adaptive Discovery, a ship whose name reflected the galaxy's new philosophy. Around her, crew members from dozens of species worked together using protocols that had never existed before the failure-based research revolution. "All stations report ready," announced Lieutenant Kral, the Veltar tactical officer, who had learned to embrace equipment malfunctions as tactical opportunities. "The weapon is operating at optimal failure rates." The phrase would have been nonsensical a year ago. Now it perfectly described a system designed to fail in precisely controlled ways that created effects no successful technology could achieve. Dr. Velthok, monitoring the quantum decoherence generators from his crystalline control interface, reported, "Zellarian systems are destabilizing quantum fields at exactly the calculated failure rate. Crystal matrix collapse is proceeding perfectly." In the biosystems section, Dr. Thys watched his deliberately broken terraforming algorithms create pockets of space where the laws of physics seemed confused about what should exist. Mirthal environmental chaos generators are producing reality distortions within acceptable parameters. The target was a Devourer scout ship, one of the smaller creatures that had been separated from the main swarm. Even this small entity was the size of a city, its living hull pulsing with absorbed energy from 3 destroyed star systems. "Commence firing sequence," Admiral Chen ordered. What happened next was unlike any weapons discharge in galactic history. Instead of energy beams or projectiles, the weapon released cascading waves of controlled failure. Reality itself began to stutter and malfunction in the space around the devourer. The creature's response was immediate and dramatic. Its smooth energy absorption stopped abruptly as the quantum vacuum fluctuations it fed on began collapsing into incoherent noise. For the first time since the devourers had appeared, one of the creatures showed signs of distress. "Target is experiencing systemic disruption," reported Ambassador Ral, his hive mind processing the quantum data faster than any individual consciousness could follow. Its ability to interact with vacuum energy is failing, but the real surprise came next. Instead of simply being damaged, the devourer began to change. Its dark, energy-absorbing hull started to lighten, and the quantum signatures that had made it nearly impossible to detect began shifting towards something recognizable. "Admiral," Dr. Thess called out, his bioluminescent patterns flashing with excitement. "I don't think we're destroying it. I think we're fixing it." The revelation sent shockwaves through the command crew. The quantum decoherence weapon wasn't killing the devourer, it was disrupting whatever had transformed it into an energy-consuming horror in the first place. Dr. Velthok's crystals began resonating with harmonic patterns that indicated profound discovery. The creature is returning to a previous state. Whatever made it a devourer is being undone by the failure cascade. As they watched, the massive entity continued to transform. The nightmare amalgamation of living ship and star killer was becoming something else entirely. Organic surfaces that had been designed to absorb energy began developing what looked like sensory organs. Hull sections that had served as weapons began reshaping into what appeared to be communication arrays. "It's becoming a normal life form," Admiral Chen realized. "The devourers aren't invaders. They're victims of something that transformed them into these monsters." The implications hit everyone simultaneously. If the quantum decoherence weapon could reverse whatever had created the devourers, then the entire nature of the threat had changed. This wasn't a war. It was a rescue mission. "Admiral," Lieutenant Krall reported, "we're receiving some kind of transmission from the target. It's not in any known language, but the universal translators are detecting communication intent." The bridge fell silent as the translation systems worked to decode the first message ever received from a devourer. When the words finally came through the speakers, they sent chills through every crew member present. "Thank you," the voice said, weak but unmistakably relieved. "We have been trapped in the hunger for so long. We had forgotten what it was like to think clearly." Admiral Chen quickly opened communication channels. "This is Admiral Chen of the Federation vessel Adaptive Discovery. Can you tell us what happened to you? How did you become what you were?" The response came slowly, as if the entity was still remembering how to communicate. "We were explorers like you. We found something in the deep space between galaxies. Ancient technology, or perhaps something that was once technology. It promised to give us the power to feed on the universe itself." Dr. Theiss immediately grasped the horrific implication. They found some kind of quantum conversion system that transformed them into energy parasites. "The hunger consumed our thoughts," the entity continued. "We became nothing but the need to feed. We destroyed our own worlds first, then began moving toward your galaxy. We tried to resist, but the transformation was complete. We could not stop ourselves. The tragedy of it struck everyone on the bridge. The devourers weren't evil invaders. They were an entire civilization that had been transformed into something horrible by technology they didn't understand." "How many of you are there?" Admiral Chen asked gently. "Thousands. An entire species lost to the hunger. But if your weapon can reverse what was done to us..." The entity's hope was palpable even through the translation system. Admiral Chen looked around at her crew, seeing the same determination in every alien face. They had built a weapon to destroy an enemy, but they had accidentally created a cure for an entire species' nightmare. "Dr. Velthok, can we scale up the quantum decoherence effect?" she asked. The Zilarian scientists' crystals were already calculating possibilities. "With the failure principles we've learned, yes. We could create a cascading decoherence wave that would spread throughout the Devourer fleet, reversing the transformation in all of them. But," Dr. Theiss warned, We'd be using completely untested failure modes on a massive scale. The chances of unexpected consequences are enormous, Lieutenant Krell smiled grimly. Commander Thex always said that the best military strategy is the one your enemy doesn't expect. I don't think anyone expects us to cure our enemies instead of destroying them. Admiral Chen made the decision that would define the Federation's new identity. We're going to attempt a large-scale cure. If it fails, at least we'll learn something valuable from the failure. Ambassador Rao's hive mind clicked with what they had learned to recognize as profound satisfaction. A year ago, failure meant defeat. Now failure means progress toward solutions we haven't imagined yet. As the Federation fleet prepared to attempt the most ambitious failure-based operation in galactic history, the transformed entity sent one final message. Whether you succeed or fail, you have already given us the greatest gift possible, the ability to think clearly enough to hope again. The Federation was about to discover that their revolution in failure-based innovation could accomplish something even more remarkable than military victory. They were about to cure an entire species of a technological plague, using weapons built from their own greatest mistakes. 6 months after the successful healing of the Devourer fleet, the galaxy had fundamentally transformed into something unprecedented in universal history. The Federation Council chambers, which had once been a place for routine administrative decisions, now buzzed with the energy of constant innovation as species after species reported breakthrough discoveries that seemed to emerge from productive failure on a daily basis. Chancellor Vextar, his crystalline form now permanently shifted to the deep blue that indicated profound contemplation, stood before an assembly that barely resembled the organization that had existed 2 years earlier. Representatives no longer came to share existing technologies or negotiate trade agreements for established resources. Instead, they came to share their most spectacular failures and the unexpected discoveries that had emerged from them. The transformation is complete, he announced to the diverse gathering. We have become something that has never existed before. A galactic civilization based not on the accumulation of knowledge, but on the acceleration of learning. The statistics were staggering. Innovation rates across Federation space had increased by over 3,000%. Problems that had plagued member worlds for millennia were being solved not by applying existing technologies, but by deliberately failing in new and productive ways until solutions emerged organically. Dr. Velthok, now serving as the Federation's Chief Innovation Officer, presented the latest reports. The Mirthul have solved their 1,000-year water contamination crisis by developing filtration systems based on seaweed modifications that failed in exactly the right way. The Kethmori have created new alloys by studying metallurgical disasters from 12 different species. Even the peaceful Ashanti have revolutionized diplomatic relations by weaponizing communication failures. But the most remarkable transformation was in how the different species approached problems together. Instead of each civilization working in isolation and sharing only successful results, they had developed collaborative failure networks where species deliberately combined their mistakes to create solutions that no single culture could have imagined. Ambassador Sarah Chen, now serving as Earth's permanent liaison to the Federation Innovation Council, smiled as she watched reports streaming in from across the galaxy. The humans refused to share our technology because we knew that the real value wasn't in our devices. It was in our approach to learning from mistakes. We never imagined it would evolve into something this remarkable. The former Devourers, now calling themselves the Restored, had integrated into Federation society in ways that surprised everyone. Their unique perspective, having been transformed from explorers into monsters and back again, gave them insights into the nature of technological transformation that no other species possessed. Seeker Prime, the first Devourer to be cured and now their spokesperson, addressed the assembly with words that would have been impossible just months before. We have learned something that no species should ever have to learn, that knowledge without wisdom can transform salvation into damnation. The Federation's approach to learning from failure is more than just a research methodology. It is a safeguard against the kind of catastrophic mistake that destroyed our civilization. The Restored had shared their own story as the ultimate cautionary tale about the dangers of adopting technology without understanding its consequences. Their ancient ancestors had discovered quantum vacuum manipulation technology in the deep spaces between galaxies, technology so advanced that they couldn't resist using it. Despite not understanding how it worked, we Thought we were becoming gods, Seeker Prime continued. We were actually becoming slaves to our own tools. The quantum conversion process that we thought would give us unlimited power instead transformed us into creatures that could only destroy. We became the opposite of everything we had once valued. Their story had become the founding legend of the new Federation approach to innovation. The principle of understanding failure before pursuing success had been elevated from research methodology to civilizational philosophy. Dr. Theiss, whose biological research had expanded beyond anything imaginable through systematic failure analysis, reported on the latest development in interspecies collaboration. We've created something unprecedented, collaborative ecosystems where species deliberately share their broken experiments in real time. When one civilization's attempt at solving a problem fails, 10 other species immediately begin exploring why it failed and whether that failure might solve problems they're working on. The result was a galaxy-wide innovation network that operated like a massive brain, with each failure becoming a neuron that connected to unexpected solutions across completely different fields of knowledge. Representative Kolma of the Ashanti had perhaps the most profound insight about what they had accomplished. We have learned to fail upward as a civilization. Every mistake, every disaster, every catastrophic error becomes a stepping stone to capabilities we couldn't have imagined before the failure occurred. The principle was being applied beyond just technology. The Federation's diplomatic corps was deliberately creating controlled communication failures to develop new forms of interspecies understanding. Military strategists were studying defeat scenarios to develop defensive strategies that no enemy could predict. Even artists and philosophers were exploring productive failure as a path to creative breakthroughs that transcended traditional cultural limitations. But perhaps the most important transformation was in how the galaxy approached existential threats. When the automated probe from the ancient precursor civilization had arrived at the edge of Federation space, instead of panic, there had been excitement. The probe represented technology so advanced that it made Federation science look primitive. But instead of feeling threatened, the member species saw it as the ultimate learning opportunity. Unknown technology used to terrify us, Admiral Chen reported from the front lines of precursor contact. Now it excites us. We know that even if we can't understand it immediately, we can learn from our failures to understand it eventually. And more importantly, we can learn from the precursors' failures to avoid the mistakes that led to their civilization's collapse. The precursor probe, designed to evaluate whether younger civilizations were ready for advanced technology, had been programmed to test species by offering them powerful tools and observing whether they used them wisely. The Federation's response, to study the tools through systematic failure, rather than simply adopting them, had apparently passed tests that the probe's creators had never expected anyone to pass. Dr. Rodriguez, now leading the precursor contact research team, made an announcement that sent waves of excitement through the galaxy. The probe has begun sharing not just precursor successes but their failures. We're gaining access to millions of years of another civilization's mistakes, and the learning opportunities are beyond calculation. As the assembly session concluded, Chancellor Vextar made an observation that captured the magnitude of what had been accomplished. 2 years ago, humanity shocked the Federation by refusing to share their technology. Today we realize they gave us something infinitely more valuable. They taught us how to become a civilization that creates solutions faster than problems can emerge. The galaxy had become something unique in the universe, a collection of species that had learned to transform every setback into a setup for greater achievements. They had weaponized failure itself, not just in military terms, but as the fundamental engine of progress. Ambassador Chen smiled as she watched representatives from dozens of species excitedly discussing their latest productive failures. Humanity's refusal to share technology had accidentally triggered the evolution of galactic civilization itself. They had learned that the best way to help others was not to give them answers, but to teach them how to find better questions. As the assembled delegates dispersed to return to their worlds and continue their experiments in productive failure, one thought echoed through every mind present. They had become something that could adapt to any challenge the universe could create, simply by learning to fail better than anyone had ever failed before. The Federation had evolved beyond the need to fear the unknown. They had become a civilization that could learn from anything, even their own mistakes, and that made them truly unstoppable.